They called him maintenance crew, until he landed the fighter no one else could fly. His name was Miles Thorne, and he never corrected them. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Every morning, at Airbase Epsilon, he showed up in the same faded blue jumpsuit, grease-stained hands, quiet demeanor. He moved between hangars with a toolbox in one hand and a clipboard in the other. He never joined the jokes. He never lingered in the mess hall. And when cadets asked, "Who's that guy?" someone always replied, "Oh, that's Thorne, just maintenance." They didn't know he checked the landing gear with surgical precision, or that he ran diagnostics twice even if no one asked him to, or that when a cadet panicked mid-simulation, Miles always appeared silently behind the instructor, watching because once he wasn't the one holding the wrench. He was the one in the cockpit. It had been 8 years since his last official flight. They said it was an engine failure, but Miles remembered every moment. Altitude, 39,000 feet. Squad leader gone radio silent. Fuel pressure spiking. No backup. No exit. He had landed that jet sideways, half dead, and walked away with a classified report stamped across his record. Survival attributed to instinct and unauthorized maneuvering. Unofficially, he disobeyed a direct order and saved a civilian convoy. The brass didn't appreciate heroism without permission. They grounded him. Now, he kept his head down. The new recruits didn't recognize him. And that was fine, until Cadet Laramie, cocky, top of his class, son of a 2-star general, burst into the hangar screaming for a tech. "I'm not flying that simulator again. It's cursed. It killed the last 3 settings." Miles looked up slowly. "The Falcon 12 sim?" "Yeah," Laramie snapped. "Something's wrong with it. Thing pulls left every time you hit Mach." Miles nodded once. "It's not the sim. It's the plane. The plane doesn't exist, it's just digital." "No," Miles said, setting his wrench down. "It's based on a prototype. There's only one real Falcon 12. Laramie scoffed. "What, you built it or something?" "I flew it." Silence fell across the hangar. Even the youngest techs looked up. Miles hadn't said those words in years. Laramie narrowed his eyes. "Prove it." And for the first time in almost a decade, Miles Thorne walked toward the sim bay. The simulator room was silent when Miles entered. A dozen cadets, 2 instructors, and a tech supervisor turned toward him with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. Miles said nothing as he approached the Falcon 12 sim pod, a sleek black unit, shaped like a short fighter hull, adorned with warning stripes and military seal markings most recruits didn't recognize. Cadet Laramie leaned back in a chair, arms crossed, smirking. "This should be fun." Miles pressed his ID against the console. "Access denied. Clearance required. Level 4. He didn't flinch. He leaned closer to the supervisor and said, "Try 3982XAL under inactive file protocol." The tech blinked. "That's a pilot clearance." Miles waited. The tech hesitated, then typed it in. "Access granted. Pilot file M. Thorne. Status grounded." The room tensed. Laramie's smirk faded. "You're serious?" he muttered. "You were actually Air Command?" Miles didn't answer. He climbed into the pod. The simulator hummed to life, lights glowing red around the interior. The screen flickered again, then filled with clouds and HUD data. The Falcon 12 cockpit was active. Command Tower had barely been notified before the sim started tracking high G turns, evasive rolls, and non-standard inverted climbs. Within 30 seconds, Miles had the digital aircraft doing things most cadets had never attempted sober. And then, the screen glitched. Miles paused. The simulator lurched. Hard left. A warning blinked. Autopilot override. External interference detected. Miles's eyes narrowed. Someone was watching. Upstairs in the darkened security monitoring room, 2 men stood silently. One wore a standard base commander uniform. The other wore civilian clothes, but his badge read, "Defense Internal Audit, Black Watch." The civilian leaned toward the screen. That's him? The commander nodded. We had no idea he retained active codes. Because someone buried his record, the civilian said. He wasn't just a pilot. He was a survivor of Red Sky. The commander blinked. That mission was sealed. Exactly. Inside the sim pod, Miles overrode the interference manually, typing with precision. The pod steadied. He glanced up at the camera built into the console. You've had your fun, he said quietly. Let me finish. The system paused, then resumed. The rest of the sim played out flawlessly. When he stepped out, sweat on his brow and breath controlled, the room stared at him like he wasn't real. Cadet Laramie stood up slowly. You ghosted the override. Miles nodded. Yeah, but who are you? Miles looked him in the eye. The guy you call when the real plane stops responding. The next morning, Miles showed up at Hangar 3 at 600 sharp. Just like always. He wore the same jumpsuit, same tools, same quiet. But the base wasn't the same anymore. Cadets who used to ignore him now watched from a distance. Instructors gave subtle nods as he passed. Laramie didn't speak at all, just moved out of his way. Miles didn't react. He wasn't here to impress anyone. He was here to keep things flying. Still, he felt it, the shift. Something had changed. Someone had turned the lights back on in a part of his life he thought had been locked away forever. Upstairs in the operations office, Commander Janes reviewed a folder marked Classified, Red Sky. Across the table, the man from Defense Audit, Agent Keller, watched her carefully. You served with Thorne, didn't you? Keller asked. Janes nodded. He was in my wing, briefly. You ever see him fly? She looked up sharply. Yes. And if he's in that simulator, I want his clearance restored. Keller leaned back, unfazed. He's not the problem. What he knows is. Janes frowned. What do you mean? Keller slid a second folder across the table. Janes opened it. Inside was a black and white photo, 5 downed aircraft. One was barely intact. The report was redacted, but the heading read, Red Sky Incident, Survivors. 1. Her eyes narrowed. Miles was the only one who made it out. Keller nodded. And he never said a word, not in any debrief, not in any review. But now he's flying again. Which means something or someone is forcing him to act. That afternoon, Miles was tightening a fuselage panel when a young cadet approached him. She hesitated. Sir? Miles looked up. I read your name in a footnote, she said. Red Sky Protocol, they said you disobeyed a direct retreat order. I did, Miles replied. Why? He paused, then stood. Because the order was wrong. The cadet blinked. They say you saved civilians, 6 convoys, by flying directly into restricted airspace. Miles nodded. I didn't follow orders. I followed instinct. She hesitated. Would you do it again? Miles looked at her, tired but honest. Every time. That night, in the simulator lab, the Falcon 12 unit went dark. A system override shut it down, completely wiped its memory logs. When the tech team arrived, all they found was a manual diagnostic screen and a single line of text blinking in. Red Sky never ended. In the shadows of the surveillance room, Agent Keller watched the footage. He tapped his earpiece. Phase 1 is confirmed. He remembers. A voice crackled on the other end. Cold. Official. Then it's time. We activate the aircraft. Let's see if Thorne can still fly it, when it's real. It started with a vibration in the hangar floor. Subtle at first. Then growing. Deep mechanical hums resonating through the walls. Miles paused mid-repair, feeling it rise through his boots like a heartbeat. Hangar 7. A section long since decommissioned. Sealed. Forgotten. Or so he'd thought. He dropped his wrench and walked. No one stopped him. Everyone else was frozen, watching the lights flicker back to life above the blast-proof doors that hadn't opened in years. Then came the hiss of pressurized locks releasing, and the door opened. Inside sat the real Falcon 12, the prototype, the same jet he flew through the Red Sky mission. Sleek, aggressive, uneven scars from rapid repairs still visible beneath the black matte hull. But this wasn't a museum piece. The fighter was lit up, systems online, reactivated, and on the cockpit screen, a blinking prompt. Pilot confirmation required, M. Thorne. Miles stepped forward like a man returning to the scene of a crime. Up in the command deck, Janes and Keller watched the feed. "You really brought it back online?" Janes hissed. "That aircraft was buried for a reason." Keller was calm. "We didn't bring it back." "He did." She turned to him. "You planted the interference in the simulator, didn't you? You wanted to wake the protocol." Keller didn't deny it. "We needed to know if the instincts were still there." "And if they are?" she asked. Keller looked at the screen. Then the next war just found its first pilot. Back in Hangar 7, Miles touched the side of the aircraft. His hand rested for a long moment on the cold metal. Then he climbed into the cockpit. The controls fit like memory. His fingers moved on their own. Boot-up codes flashed across the HUD. "Welcome back, Captain Thorne." His breath caught. He hadn't heard that voice in years. The cockpit sealed around him. Suddenly, a second screen blinked alive, a video feed. It showed a small convoy crossing a mountain pass in real time. Audio kicked in. Panic, static gunfire. Jane's voice filtered through his comm. "We have a developing situation. That convoy's under drone fire, civilian escort, no air support." Miles' fingers hovered above the ignition switch. "Wait," Jane said. "This isn't an order." "It never is," Miles whispered, and, with one final breath, he ignited the Falcon 12. The hangar lit up like a sunrise of jet flame. Technicians scattered. Sirens blared. The roof opened, and the fighter roared into the sky. One man, one mission, no permission. Inside the surveillance room, Keller smiled faintly. Red Sky was never about the mission. It was about the pilot who broke it. At 40,000 feet, the Falcon 12 flew like a memory. Miles didn't need the HUD. He felt every shift in wind, every pulse of thrust. His hands moved across the controls with the ease of someone dancing with an old partner, one that nearly killed him once. Below, the convoy moved through a narrow canyon, boxed in on both sides. Above, 2 enemy drones circled like vultures, silent. High altitude, heat-seeking, and no one else was coming. No backup, no orders, just Miles. Command base was chaos. Jane stood frozen in the control room while tech scrambled to trace the Falcon's position. "He's climbing into drone range," one called. "He's going to get locked." "Not unless he drops low and fast," Janes muttered. "But no one's ever pulled that maneuver in real time." "Except him," someone whispered. Inside the cockpit, Miles pushed the Falcon into a dive. The wings screamed as the air resistance tripled. Mountains blurred past the canopy, meters from impact. Warning lights exploded across the dash. G-force pressed him deep into the seat. But he didn't blink. He skimmed the canyon floor, low enough to shake dust from the rocks, then veered, up just as the first drone launched a missile. Too late. It struck the ridge wall instead, erupting behind him in a rain of shattered stone. Miles climbed, inverted, and flipped above the second drone before firing a single shot. Direct hit. The drone spiraled out of view in flames. Back at base, no one spoke. Janes exhaled slowly. "That was textbook." "No," Keller corrected. "That was instinct. Protocol doesn't teach that." As Miles pulled level, static filled his comms. Then, another voice came through. Not Jane's. Not control. A man's voice. Cold. Familiar. "You shouldn't be up here, Thorne." Miles froze. That voice hadn't spoken to him since the Red Sky incident. "You ignored orders then. You're doing it again now." "You gave bad orders then," Miles replied calmly. "And no one gave them now. We buried your clearance for a reason. You're unstable." "You're afraid," Miles said. Afraid the rest of them will realize we don't need permission to save lives. The voice went silent. Then one final line. Return to base, or we make you disappear. For good this time. Miles clicked the comm off. He looked at the convoy below. Safe now, rolling forward. He could land. Go back. Obey, or finish what Red Sky never let him complete. He opened the mission relay. There were more convoys, more threats, and no one in the sky to meet them. Until now, he throttled forward. In the command room, Janes received the ping. Where's he going? Keller asked. Janes smiled faintly. Where we stopped him from going 8 years ago. Miles didn't land. Instead, he rerouted. There were 2 more convoys flagged in the eastern zone. No air support, terrain too dangerous, radar jammed. He didn't wait for authorization. He didn't ask. He flew. And the moment the system saw his flight path shift, the base lit up with panic. Sir, he's gone dark from base protocols. He's piggybacking off civilian satellite networks. He's rerouting airspace manually, like he knows where the blind spots are. Janes stood frozen in the operations center. Across from her, Agent Keller paced. This is exactly why we buried him, Keller snapped. He doesn't follow orders. He becomes the mission. Maybe that's what we need, Janes said quietly. Keller's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting we let him continue? I'm saying he just took out 2 drones with 0 support, she replied. And now he's moving to protect another unit we didn't even know was compromised. Maybe we should be asking why he's right instead of why he's rogue. Keller said nothing, because deep down, he knew. Miles Thorne had just turned the manual into a suggestion. Meanwhile, in hangars across the base, something unusual was happening. Pilots, those off-duty, those benched, even a few who hadn't flown in months, began checking their cockpits. One by one, silently. No orders were issued. But they were listening, because somewhere in the sky, someone had just reminded them what it meant to act, not to wait. Cadet Laramie sat in the simulator room, watching the live telemetry feed. Thorne's altitude, 12,000 adepti speed, Mach 1.4. Route off-grid. Laramie looked at the screen, then down at his own hands, then stood. He walked into the sim bay and strapped in, alone. Back in the Falcon 12, Miles zeroed in on the second convoy. This one was under heavy fire. Artillery shells rained down from a hidden ridge. He had no visual on the attackers. No drones, no coordinates. But he remembered this terrain, the incline, the blind spot behind the ridge. He angled the Falcon up, climbed into cloud cover, then nosedived straight through the mist, engines screaming. There, 3 enemy vehicles, scrambled, below. He locked. Fired, direct hit. Target neutralized, he muttered. A moment of silence followed. Then a new voice cut through his comm. This is Echo Flight 2. Permission to join you on the next run? Miles blinked. Then another voice. Echo 3 here, already in the air. Echo 4, on your wing. Miles didn't smile, but his voice softened. Wasn't asking for help. Good, Echo 2 replied. We weren't asking for orders. Back, at base, Keller stared at the command board as red dots turned green one after another. Unauthorized launches. Dozens. Pilots returning to the sky, following no chain of command, just one man's flight path. You didn't wake up a protocol, Jane said. You woke up a rebellion. By dawn, there were 13 Falcon-class fighters airborne, all unapproved, all following a man who hadn't held a rank in nearly a decade. Miles didn't give orders. He didn't have to. He flew, and they flew with him. Not because they were told, but because something inside them remembered why they became pilots in the first place. At command base, Agent Keller was losing control. What is this? A mutiny? Janes didn't look up from the screen. It's a mirror, the system's seeing what it tried to suppress. They're violating every protocol we have. They're rewriting it, she said. Keller turned toward her. You knew this would happen the moment he stepped into that cockpit. She nodded. and I let it happen. Meanwhile, Miles hovered above the final checkpoint, an escort unit trapped by terrain, their radios jammed. He'd flown 4 hours straight. No refuel, no co-pilots, no brakes, just instinct, just purpose. Echo 6, brake left. Echo 9, cover high ridge. Copy that, Thorn. He flinched at the name. It had been so long since anyone said it without sarcasm or clearance checks. He was no longer maintenance crew. He was Miles Thorn again. Back at base, an emergency session was underway. A high-ranking general appeared on a secure screen, fuming. Who authorized these launches? No one answered. Who is in charge of this operation? Silence. Then Janes stepped forward. He is. She tapped the main display. Miles's call sign, Falcon 1. The general scowled. We shut that designation down. Janes nodded. That was your mistake. As the last threat was neutralized, Miles received a direct signal from command. Not encrypted, just simple text. Return home. We'll talk. He hovered over the message for a long time, then replied, Home is where they let me fly. He didn't land. Not yet. He made one final pass over the base, a slow, deliberate arc. Below, hundreds stood outside the hangars, watching, saluting, even Keller, even Janes. Later that week, a classified memo circulated through military channels. Reinstatement, Captain Miles Thorn. Designation Falcon 1. Clearance, restored status, active, and beneath it, handwritten in ink. Sometimes the manual needs a pilot who can ignore it. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story moved you, inspired you, or simply made you think, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and join us for more powerful stories about strength, second chances, and the quiet heroes among us. Until next time, stay grounded and fly with purpose.